The year was 1865, and the plains lay beneath a bruised sky, wide and waiting, an endless stretch of grass and dust that could swallow whole towns without a whisper. Smoke hung low over the Cheyenne encampment that night, curling from campfires like quiet spirits dancing their last before dawn. Ayanna knelt beside the firelight, her dark braids catching sparks as she carved new arrowheads from flint. The sound of each strike, sharp, deliberate, was the heartbeat of her patience. She was young, yet her eyes carried a knowing weight, one that came from a land that demanded endurance as much as faith. Her brother, Toka, only 12, crouched beside her, his fingers stained with earth as he tried to mimic her precision. "You always make them too perfect," he teased. "The spirits will think you're trying to show off." Ayanna smiled faintly, the corner of her lips twitching. "If the spirits wish to test me, they'll find I'm ready." She glanced toward their father, who stood by the main lodge, speaking with the elders. The old man's posture was straight despite the years. His voice carried the calm authority of one who had survived too many storms. The air smelled of sage and roasted corn. Children's laughter rippled from the fires. For a brief moment the world felt whole, but peace in the frontier was as fragile as a bird's wing. The horses were the first to sense it. Their restless snorts sliced through the night's hum. Ayanna's father raised a hand, listening. The drumming came faintly at first, hooves pounding somewhere beyond the hills. It grew louder. "Closer. Get inside," he ordered. Ayanna rose, bow in hand. The sound became thunder. Then the thunder split into chaos. Gunfire cracked across the plains, and men on horseback burst from the darkness like phantoms of iron and greed. Their coats flapped with dust, their rifles spat light. Screams cut the night. Fires overturned. Ayanna saw her mother rush from their lodge, calling for Toka. The boy froze, clutching his bow. She ran to him, but a shot rang, and the world seemed to tilt. Ayanna's breath caught as her mother fell, her body striking the dirt with a sound too final for the living. "Mother!" Toka screamed, and before Ayanna could reach him, he too went down, thrown backward by a bullet meant for someone else. Ayanna's vision blurred red. Her hand moved on instinct. She notched an arrow, drew, and loosed it in one motion. A raider fell, clutching his throat. She turned, drew another, fired again. Every shot was a heartbeat, every breath a vow. But they were too many, too fast. Then she saw him. He sat tall on a black horse, coat heavy with rain and road dust. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but the firelight caught the edges of his beard, the glint of his revolver. He didn't fire. He simply watched. The others followed his commands, not his bullets. For a brief second, their eyes met across the burning camp. There was something unreadable there. Not cruelty, not pity, but recognition, as though he'd seen too many nights like this before. Ayanna drew her bow again, her breath shaking. She aimed for his chest. The man didn't move. Instead, he lifted his rifle slightly, then lowered it, as if to say, "Don't." But she did. The arrow flew, slicing through the smoke. It struck his shoulder, spinning him halfway in the saddle. He grunted, gripping the wound. Blood darkened the gray of his coat. Yet he didn't return fire. He only turned his horse, shouting an order that carried over the roar of the flames. The raiders withdrew as quickly as they'd come, vanishing into the horizon like ghosts called back to hell. Ayanna stood among the ruin, her chest heaving, bow trembling in her hand. Her village burned around her. She stumbled toward Toka, dropped to her knees beside his still body, and pressed her hand to his face. His eyes were open but empty, fixed on a sky that no longer promised anything. When dawn came, the smoke had thinned, and silence settled heavy as grief. The bodies were scattered, the ground painted with loss. Ayanna walked through it all like someone drifting between worlds. Her father was gone, her mother gone, her brother gone. Only the ashes remained to tell their story. She gathered what she could, a quiver half-burned, a pouch of herbs, the necklace Toka had worn. It was made of small turquoise stones and a carved hawk's talon, the mark of their clan. She tied it around her wrist and stared at the horizon, where the last of the raiders had disappeared. Ayanna began to dig graves, her fingers raw from the effort. She buried her family beneath the scorched earth and placed an arrow above each mound, their fletchings swaying gently in the wind. The land was quiet, but the quiet was not peace. It was a wound still bleeding. She knelt by her mother's grave last. The air was cold now, heavy with the scent of smoke and morning dew. Her lips moved, whispering words not meant for human ears. I will not rest until the blood that spilled here is answered. I will find the man with the scar. As the sun rose, light caught the distant trail of hoofprints heading west. The ash glittered faintly, like ghosts stirring to watch her go. She gathered her bow, tightened the leather band around her wrist, and walked toward the open plains. The wind met her face with a bitter chill, but her steps did not falter. Every stride away from the graves was a promise to her dead, to herself, to the land that had taken everything. She crossed rivers that cut cold as knives. She slept beneath trees whose roots whispered stories of the old world. When wolves howled, she did not run. She whispered back in her tongue, and they left her be. Hunger gnawed, rain bit, but she endured. Her mind replayed that man's face again and again. The way he looked at her, steady, haunted, as if seeing his own sins mirrored in her fury. She wondered if he still felt the arrow buried in his flesh, if the wound burned as hers did now. One night, as she made camp near the ridge, a storm rolled over the land, splitting the sky with light. She held her bow close, eyes reflecting the fire she could never forget. You will see this bow again, she murmured to the darkness, and you will remember what you took. The wind carried her voice into the storm. Lightning flared, turning the plains to silver. For a heartbeat, she imagined the spirits of her kin watching from the clouds, their faces fierce and unbroken. By morning, her path was set. She followed the wagon tracks west, toward the trading towns and forts that stank of whiskey and blood. Her moccasins left barely a trace behind her, but her resolve left a trail no man could miss. The plains stretched endlessly before her, but she did not see emptiness. She saw a path carved by vengeance and fate. Each step took her closer to the world of men, where justice wore a gun belt and mercy had a price. The sun climbed higher, turning the sky to brass. Ayanna reached the crest of a hill and looked back once more. Smoke still rose from the ruins in the far distance, curling upward like a final prayer. She whispered softly, I carry you with me. Then she turned away from everything she had ever known. Her shadow stretched long across the land, thin and fierce against the dawn. The bow in her hand gleamed with the light of a new day, and though the arrow had once shaken, her heart no longer did. She walked west. The wind followed, whispering her name. The days turned to weeks, and the plains grew harsher the farther Ayanna walked. The sky seemed wider out here, a dome of iron and dust. She moved through it like a shadow, her bow always within reach, her senses honed to every crack of branch and distant coyote cry. Hunger pressed close, but she'd learned to live with it. A rabbit snared at dawn, a handful of wild roots by night. Survival was no longer struggle but rhythm. Her grief had cooled into something sharper, cleaner. It gave her strength. The land shifted as she went west, less wild, more marked by man. Wagon ruts carved scars through the dirt, and spent cartridges glittered half-buried in the mud. She passed an old trading post, its sign swinging from one chain. The door creaked open, and a bearded man peered out. He had the look of someone who'd seen too much and cared too little. Storm's comin', he called. Ain't safe out there for a lady alone. Ayanna didn't stop. The word lady felt foreign, something belonging to another world. She kept her bow lowered but ready. The man's eyes followed her until she disappeared into the gathering dark. By dusk, the storm found her, sheets of rain slashing sideways, the wind tearing across the open fields like a living thing. She spotted a cluster of trees near a rocky ridge and hurried toward them. Lightning flared, and in that brief flash, she saw something, or someone, lying near the base of a tree. A horse stood nearby, reins tangled in brush. The man beside it was motionless, his coat soaked and torn. For a heartbeat, Iona thought he was dead. Then he stirred, groaning low. She approached cautiously, arrow-notched. When she turned him over, the breath caught in her throat. A deep scar marked his shoulder, a fresh wound crusted beneath it. The same scar she remembered through the firelight, the same face. Her grip tightened on the bow. She could kill him now. One arrow, one release. The storm would wash away the blood before dawn. His eyes opened suddenly, gray-blue beneath the shadow of his hat. Recognition flickered there, slow but certain. "You again," he rasped, voice hoarse. "Guess I had that coming." She drew the bowstring back. The arrow trembled. He didn't move, didn't beg, just watched her with the same weary resignation he'd worn that night of fire. "If you're going to do it," he said quietly, "make it clean." The rain beat harder, filling the silence between them. She saw the exhaustion etched into his face, the lines carved by years of battle and guilt. He wasn't the commanding figure she remembered, not anymore. He was wounded, hunted, and alone. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely carrying through the rain. "Why did you burn my people?" He shut his eyes. "Orders," he said, from a man who thought gold meant more than blood. "I didn't stop it. That's my sin." The arrow trembled again. Her arms burned from holding it steady. The wind howled through the trees, tearing at her braids. But still she didn't loose it. "You should have died that night," she said. "Maybe I did," he muttered. His head dropped against the mud. "What's left ain't much worth saving." The rain washed over them both, cold and relentless. Iona's breath came ragged now, not from anger, but confusion. Killing him would bring her nothing but another hollow silence. She lowered the bow, the arrow still clutched tight in her fist. "You live," she said flatly, "but only because I need answers." She dragged him beneath a low ridge where the earth rose like a shallow cave. She built a small fire, its smoke curling into the storm. He drifted in and out of consciousness, shivering despite the heat. When she removed his coat to tend the wound, she found a small locket tucked against his chest. Inside it, a woman's faded picture and a child's drawing of a house by a river. She stared at it for a long moment, then placed it back without a word. When he woke again, the fire had burned low. His voice was a rasp. "Didn't expect mercy from you." "It's not mercy," she said. "It's debt. You owe me truth." He gave a hollow laugh that ended in a cough. "Name's Cole Harding. Used to wear a uniform, then a badge. Now I just wear regrets." She studied him silently. "And the men who rode with you?" "Dead," he said. "Or worse. They work for Colonel Briggs now. He's the one you want." "Then I'll find him." Cole shook his head. "You won't make it alone. Briggs don't fight fair. He's got soldiers, bounty men, a whole damn fort to hide behind." "I've walked through worse," she said. "Not like this," he answered. "He's the kind that burns villages and sleeps easy after." The fire cracked between them. Cole's gaze softened, though the weight behind it stayed. "You think revenge makes you whole. It don't. It just takes what little you got left." Iona looked into the flames. "You'd know." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I would." The storm eased by morning, leaving the world washed clean, but still heavy with mud. Iona helped him to his feet. He winced, but didn't complain. They packed what little they had and started west together. Neither spoke much at first. The silence between them was uneasy but necessary, like the distance between a drawn bow and its mark. Days passed. Cole taught her to handle a rifle properly, to read the terrain for ambushes, to find water by tracing the flight of birds. In return, she taught him quiet, the kind that wasn't emptiness but awareness. He learned to walk softer, to listen before speaking, to understand that the land itself was watching. Once, they came upon a rusted rail track cutting through the valley. Cole stopped, staring down the line. "Men think they can tame this country with steel," he said. "They don't see what it takes back." Iona glanced at him. "Everything." That night, under a sky stitched with stars, she finally asked, "Why didn't you shoot me that night?" He thought for a long while. "Because you didn't deserve to die for the sins of old men," he said. "And maybe because I saw something in your eyes I couldn't face." "What was that?" "Judgment." For a moment, the air between them shifted, not forgiveness, but understanding, a fragile thing born from shared ruin. 2 days later, they reached the edge of the river. The current was swollen from rain, a dark ribbon tearing through stone. Cole limped, but insisted on crossing first. Halfway through, the earth gave way under his horse. He went down hard, caught in the pull. Without thinking, Iona dove in after him. The cold bit like knives, but she fought through it, gripping his coat and hauling him to shore. He coughed out water, groaning, "You should have let me drown." "Not yet," she said. "You still owe me a road to Briggs." He laughed weakly. "You're stubborn." "I'm alive," she replied. That night, she stitched the new gash on his arm by firelight. He winced but didn't flinch. She worked carefully, her fingers steady. When it was done, he looked at her, eyes hollow but grateful. "You saved me." "You saved me once," she said softly. "It doesn't erase what you did." He nodded. "Then maybe it's a start." The moon rose over the plains, pale and cold. Ahead, on the horizon, a faint glimmer of torchlight marked the fort where Colonel Briggs waited. Iona's hand brushed the bow at her side. "Then let's finish what began in fire." Cole's gaze followed hers, steady now. "We will." The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of rain and iron. Together they walked toward the lights, two broken souls bound by purpose, neither certain what forgiveness might cost. The night had fallen hard and cold, its silence broken only by the rasp of wind sliding through the canyons. The stars hung low, like witnesses to a reckoning long overdue. Ilara crouched behind a cluster of rocks, her bow resting across her knees, the string taut as her breath. Her fingers brushed the fletching of the last arrow she had carved that morning, the one she had promised herself she would save for truth, not vengeance. Yet truth and vengeance had become the same thing now. Below, the outlaw camp flickered with dim firelight. Shadows moved between the wagons, figures rough and restless, laughter breaking in hoarse bursts. She could hear Cole's voice among them, sharp and confident, the same tone that had once made her believe she wasn't alone in this world. But that voice now carried something else, a cruel certainty that had replaced love. He was a man made hollow by his own ambition, and she had become the consequence of his lies. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying with it the faint scent of burning pine. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, remembering the cabin, the way the firelight once danced on his face, how he had said her hands were steady even when her heart was breaking. "You shoot like you've got something to prove," he'd teased. She did, and tonight she would prove it once more. Ilara's breath trembled as she drew the string back. The arrow aimed not at his chest, but at his world, the wagon where he kept the stolen rifles, the ones meant to ignite another war. Her arrow could end it all before it began. But hesitation crept in like frost. She thought of the boy from the settlement, his mother's tears, the scar across his arm. Cole had caused that. Yet still her hand shook. Somewhere beneath the hate, something old and fragile stirred. The fire below shifted. Cole stepped forward, his silhouette outlined in gold. He was pacing, restless, barking orders to his men. "At dawn we ride for Red River," he said. "No one stands in our way." Ilara's pulse quickened. Red River, that meant the settlers, the women and children who had fled the raids. He'd burned them out, just as he'd burned her home. The choice vanished. She loosed the arrow. The hiss of it cutting through the air was almost silent, but its impact was thunder. The wagon burst into flame, sparks scattering across the camp like stars caught in a gale. Shouts erupted, men scrambling, rifles snatched from the dirt. Cole turned, eyes wide, scanning the ridge. "Up there," someone yelled. She ducked, low, heart hammering. Smoke began to curl upward, thick and choking. She slipped down the rocky slope, moving from shadow to shadow. A shot rang out, too close. Stone splintered beside her face. She bit back a cry and pressed forward. Cole's voice cut through the chaos. "Find her. She's here somewhere." She reached the tree-lean, crouching low behind a fallen log. The fire was spreading fast, illuminating the canyon with fierce orange light. Then she saw him, running toward the blaze, shouting for his men to save what they could. He looked almost desperate, almost human. But Ilara knew better. Another shot cracked through the night, and this time she answered. Her arrow flew straight, embedding in the dirt inches from his boots. He froze. Slowly, his gaze rose to where she stood, framed by the flames, bow in hand. "Ilara," he said, his voice carrying across the distance. "Don't do this." "You did this," she called back. Her voice shook, not from fear, but from the weight of everything between them. "You made me what I am." He stepped forward, hands raised slightly, eyes locked on hers. "We were supposed to build something together. You and me, we could still." She cut him off. "You built it on blood." He stopped. The fire reflected in his eyes now, twin embers of something broken. "You think they'll thank you for what you've done? They'll use you till you're nothing, just like they used me." Ilara steadied her bow again, the string biting into her fingertips. "Then I'll burn with the truth, not the lie." For a heartbeat neither moved. Then Cole reached for his pistol. The arrow flew before the thought had even formed. It struck his shoulder, spinning him backward into the dirt. He groaned, clutching at the wound, disbelief etched across his face. "You won't make it out," he rasped. She turned, but the fire had already trapped the path behind her. Smoke rolled thick and hot. She ran toward the ravine, the only escape left. Behind her, gunfire snapped, bullets whining past like angry hornets. She stumbled over roots, lungs burning. The edge came suddenly, a cliff dropping into darkness. There was no time to think. She leapt. Cold water swallowed her whole, the current pulling her down, spinning her in its black heart. She fought to the surface, gasping, the bow still clutched in one hand. The river dragged her miles before spitting her out onto a muddy bank. She lay there for what felt like hours, shivering, watching the sky shift from night to gray. When she finally stood, dawn was breaking, soft light spilling over the ridges. Behind her, smoke still rose from the canyon, a dark scar against the morning. She didn't know if Cole was dead or dying, and for once, it didn't matter. She walked north, following the river. Each step felt heavier, but freer too. She was no longer the woman who had waited in silence, who had begged for justice for men who never gave it. She was something else now, something forged in fire and loss. By noon, she reached the settlement. The people stared as she approached, soot-streaked, soaked, a ghost of what she'd been. A woman stepped forward, the same one who'd lost her son's arm. Her eyes met Ilara's, searching. "It's over," Ilara said simply. "He won't come again." The woman nodded, tears cutting through the dust on her cheeks. "Then you've done what no man would." Ilara looked out toward the horizon, where the smoke met the sky. The wind caught her hair again, and for the first time, it felt like breath, not burden. She unstrung her bow, set it across a rock, and whispered, "Let it end here." But even as she turned away, the sound of hooves echoed faintly in the distance, far off, but steady, a promise or a warning. And though her hands no longer shook, her heart knew one truth. Well, the frontier never gave peace freely. It had to be taken arrow by arrow, will by will. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because every story, even one carved in flame, deserves to be heard.